You're listening to Ecto Portal, a journey into the unknown with Anthony Anderson and Verna Wilson.
I hope that you are seated comfortably, with the light turned down and the curtains drawn.
Hello and welcome once again to another episode of Ecto Portal. I'm Anthony Anderson, your host, and I'm here with my co-host,
Verna Wilson.
Today's show is really rather odd. I don't know how many people are going to believe in this particular episode, but it is about a strange tale of a red gnome. And it took place in 1858, and we'll elaborate in a few minutes.
And it's not the gnome in your garden.
No, it's definitely not the gnome in your garden. If it is, I would be a little worried.
Yeah.
So, what's on your mind this lately, Verna?
Well, I'm thinking about how many cities in the Bay Area are very haunted and very old that people don't even realize is going on all around them. Mm-hmm. That's just because I visited Benicia yesterday, and you walk around the whole city. There's old buildings. There's the old train station there. And the whole place is teeming with haunted energy. Yeah. The whole city. And I actually went by the Fisher Hanlon House, and I went by the courthouse there, which actually used to be the Capitol Courthouse before they moved to Sacramento. Mm-hmm. And even the locals there tell me that they've been to these places and that it's very haunted. Mm-hmm. And they mentioned that it's very haunted. They witnessed doors opening and closing by themselves, and they said they brought in their kids, and their kids noticed that it was haunted.
Wow, so you got multiple eyewitnesses.
Definitely. And then there's the Union Hotel there, which is known to be haunted, and even the people who work there said that they've had witnesses that they witnessed apparitions and noise and all kinds of stuff going on, and they're very aware that it's haunted. So I think that Benicia is actually one of those cities that does not get as much press about that. But
well, no, we did an episode too with the
Ghost Walk. Yeah, with the Benicia Ghost Walk. But I definitely think it's one of those cities that need to be explored and talked about more for its history and for its haunted history, really. Mm-hmm. The officials that I talk to there tell me that they know it's haunted, a lot of these buildings, but of course they don't advertise it because not every single tourist or local that visits there is going to want to know that. But
true.
But the locals are all aware of it, and the people who work around there, they're all aware of it, but they don't advertise it. But it's definitely, if you're in Benicia, it's an interesting place to visit, and if you're into the paranormal, and then you're going to notice it right away, mm-hmm. I think. Right away. We
might have to do a special episode of when we go up there, just an investigation episode like we usually do.
We will. We should. We will and we should, because there's lots of places to go to, mm-hmm. And that they're not so far from each other. So
that's even better.
That's even better, yeah. And even some of the shops there's antique shops there that are in very old buildings, mm-hmm. and you walk in and with all the different rooms, and you notice that there's a lot of energy in those rooms. And there was this one shop that I visited yesterday. I'm not going to say which one, but I went into a room by myself looking for some stuff, and I just I heard footsteps and noise there, and of course it's an old building, so you're going to hear noises, but Something didn't feel like it was the
weren't
usual.
alone?
I was alone because.
I mean, you weren't alone.
Oh, I was not alone. No, my boyfriend was in the other room.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure if I mentioned this to him, but it just didn't feel like the building. It felt like somebody was there because I turned around to see if there was a customer or somebody, and there wasn't. So that's probably what you're going to witness when you're in one of those stores. Yeah.
I do. I want to go to there, and I want to go to Eureka as well.
Oh yeah.
Because Eureka's kind of a hot spot right now.
With all the gold rush history, yeah.
Well, there's been a couple events successful events in the last couple of years there. A lot of people saying, "Wow, this is like the new Virginia City as far as hot spots."
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So.
What about Yuba City? Isn't that kind of the same?
I don't know.
Isn't there like a really old part of Yuba City that has a big gold rush history?
I've never been there. I don't know.
Oh, well, if any locals want to tell us about their hot spots, we're open.
Absolutely. We'll set up a show and be on the show.
Yeah. And what's on your mind? Besides...
I have no mind.
Well...
I'm just thinking of
put
Scotland
your mind on.
Coming up for me.
Oh, God, that's good. There you go.
See, now that I'm getting closer, it's literally a month away from me right now. I'll be in Scotland a month from now.
Wow, you must be excited.
I am now because it's getting closer. When it was back, when I started planning in the beginning of the year, you're like, it's too far away.
Uh-huh.
But now it's like, because I'm going to stay at Chillingham Castle for a couple nights.
Oh,
that's
wow.
a very famous northern England castle. It's on all
my God.
ghost hunting TV shows over there, most haunted.
Oh, you're going to experience stuff. I know you will.
But we're lining up Scottish castles because I'm going to do EVP work in every castle.
Ooh.
And, Mary Queen of Scots' residence is in the Queen's Castle in Scotland that she stays at.
We all know the drama she got into.
Right. Hopefully the Queen's not staying there, because if she's not, you get to have a tour inside.
Ooh.
And you get to go through the Mary Queen of Scots personal residence area.
Yeah.
I want to do a little work in there if I can swing it.
Oh, that'll be great. I hope you get to do all the work you want, because
I hope so too, but we'll see.
Yeah.
You never know. But I always do it on the fly. I have it ready to go.
You know, speaking of that, somebody visited a place where Richard III and his wife Anne used to frequent all the time, and they recorded a voice calling his name, and he said it was like one of the most original EVPs he's ever gotten from that area, And when I heard the voice, it sounded like a very, very young girl, but I keep forgetting that Richard III's wife, Anne, was like only 15 or 16 years old when he married her. So of course
that wasn't uncommon then at all either.
Not at all, but that's why her voice sounds so young.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy and my friend who sent me the EVP, in fact, we had him on the show once, Michael Reed.
Mm-hmm.
He is very picky about that stuff. He doesn't believe half of it, but he told me, Verna, this is real, because it came from somebody reliable that he knew about. And he said, listen, and you hear a young girl's voice going, Richard, and the accent is not from, I'm saying it badly, but the accent is not from, it's not your modern British Day accent. And it's like a very young girl's voice. So I'm not surprised it was her. Yeah.
Interesting.
So you may get something very similar to that.
I don't know. In St. John's Castle in Ireland, I got a few. And like I said, I think I mentioned this before. When you go visit that castle, they're currently excavating underneath where the old ground used to be.
Oh, wow.
So you're finding all the walls and where all the villagers lived inside the castle grounds.
Oh, wow.
So they're uncovering all these walls and living areas, and you can actually walk down through the excavation site.
Oh, my God.
There's like a little deck. But I did EVPs down there. I do it everywhere because you never know. I wait till someone's gone, even during the day. Then I'll take pictures and do a little EVP work. So
wow.
You never know.
Yeah, I mean, all kinds of stuff happened, and even violent stuff happened. Mm-hmm. So, and people, lots of life.
In Edinburgh, there's so many plague victims and tortures. And
I bet.
They executed so many people. I'm bound to get something there.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, I'm excited for that. So I'm prepping for Scotland.
Oh, wow.
Fun. All right. Now, today's episode, again, is the Strange Tale of a Red Gnome. It actually began in 1858 on a 138-foot long, 385-ton wooden bridge called the Black Hawk.
It's pretty big.
It's built in Ohio City. Built by Stevens and Presley, it sailed from Detroit, Michigan to Liverpool, England, laden with very strange cargo. Down in the hold of the ship, stowed away among the 19,000 bushels of corn and parcels and various stained glass, there was a barrel containing a pickled corpse of something really, really terrifying. So let's back up. In Detroit, Michigan, in June of 1763, British captain named James Dalyell and 58 of his officers were followed near the banks of the Detroit River by a small, misshapen, crimson-clad figure that had penetrating eyes, large fang mouth, and a hideous scarlet face.
Oh, wow.
Several soldiers shot at the weird-looking creature. A trapper actually warned the captain and his men that they were being stalked by what some of the local French settlers called the Nain Rogue, the Red Gnome, a sinister supernatural entity whose very appearance foretold misfortune and death. Sure enough, shortly after seeing the Crimson Dwarf, the captain and his soldiers were ambushed and massacred by Indian chief Pontiac, and the blood of the slain turned the tributary of the Detroit River red for days. So that's how many people
ugly.
died.
That's ugly.
Decades early, of course, the founder of the Detroit, Antoine de la Motte Cadillac, was also unlucky enough to see the Red Gnome and lost his vast fortune and his political standing. The diminutive omen of impending misfortune and death was again seen in 1801, so we're going forward in the time. Shortly before the wooden city of Detroit was destroyed by a fire, then in the War of 1812, the Nain Rogue was seen following about in a fog of by many witnesses, including General William Hull, who was forced to hand over Detroit to the British troops just days later. In 1857, around the end, there was another rumor that a couple of hunters had killed the Red Gnome in the forest. They shot at him several times and fixed him to a tree with their bayonets to prevent him from escaping. And the body had been exhibited and packed in salt.
Ugh. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's gross.
It is gross. So the Red Gnome was superstitious people of the colony. Of course, there was many during that period, arranged for the monstrosity to be burnt, for there was a widespread fear that it would return to life and that a giant fire was built in the clearing. Someone approached the man who had killed the strange creature and purchased it for an undisclosed amount of money.
Wow.
In Liverpool, a collector of strange oddities arranged for the cadaver of the gnome to be shipped to their home of the warehouse keeper Michael Connolly at 25 Clarence Street, Everton. The Black Hawk brig brought the curious cargo to Liverpool docks. This was the ship. And the small casket was delivered to the wrong Clarence Street.
Oh, that's scary.
There were 3 streets of that name in the city all at the same time, and instead of going to the Everton, it was delivered to the home of Abraham Harris, a jeweler who was living at 25 Clarence Street in the city center.
Oh, gee. What
Could
a
you
great
imagine?
gift. Wow.
A servant signed for the casket, and Mr. Harris was horrified when he saw the grotesque little man pickled in brine in a barrel.
Yeah.
The cask was stored in his cellar, and in the evening when the jeweler went down to show a colleague the terrifying, horrible little corpse, it was empty, and the lid was lying on the floor.
Oh, I don't know about that. If it made it never mind.
The evil creature was never seen again, and had someone stolen the gnome? Nobody really knows at this point what happened to this strange gnome. So now, what do you think this gnome could have been?
Well, 2 things. Okay, it could have been a dwarf, a real dwarf, who was disabled, and he had a weird appearance, and he was looked upon with superstition by everybody.
Yep. A dwarf with rosacea, probably.
With rosacea, yeah. And he was looked upon as superstition by everybody, and he got away from where he was living, which was probably a colony of... They had colonies back then of dwarfs and little people.
They were afraid of everything.
They were afraid of everything.
A curse, a strange creature from the devil.
Right. So they didn't understand disabilities back then.
Yeah.
So he was he paid for being different, which was, if that's true, it was very sad for him. Or I'm not dismissing the fact that there are nature spirits, there are nature realms. Remember, this happened back in the 1700s. The world was very young back then. And if you really believe that there are other dimensions, the veils between the world were not as as invisible as they are now. People lived closer to the earth. They used their psychic senses more. And remember, we did another show earlier called The Children of Woolpit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Green
And they
Children of
escaped.
Woolpit.
Yeah, and they escaped from another dimension or realm, and they were seen as real back then.
That's true.
So this person could have done the same, and he just didn't know
Didn't know
how.
where to go,
He didn't
what
know
to
where to
do.
go, what to do, and everybody, and he kind of, and people back then were violent by anybody or anything that they didn't understand. So he paid for being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
It's funny how they describe him: penetrating eyes, a large fanged mouth. He could have had just really bad teeth,
Yeah.
and a hideous scarlet face, rosacea.
Right, and penetrating eyes. If he was actually from another dimension where their spirits are a little bit more intuitive or psychic than ours and open, it shows in your eyes a lot for those kind of people. I've met people who have very strong psychic energy, and it shows in their eyes, and if it shows in the eyes of somebody who's a very strong psychic against somebody who's just a violent weirdo who shoots at anything that's different, it's going to look different to you.
Well, what's interesting is they say that it's a sinister supernatural entity whose appearance foretold misfortune and death. Now that sounds like superstition, and people who
That
are
does sound like
afraid,
superstition.
people who don't understand that are afraid. Therefore, he was obviously the bringer of death because they don't understand him.
Well, it could be karma. I mean, if they did something horrible to somebody who didn't do anything to them, they're getting shit back. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're getting something bad happen to them because they probably did something awful to somebody else.
And if Captain Dalyell and his soldiers were ambushed by the Indian chief Pontiac, and they said this is after they saw the dwarf. Again, it's belief.
It's a belief. Like,
superstition. Oh my God.
It's blame,
Just remember, before we were attacked by those Indians and we were all slaughtered and turned the river red for
We
days,
saw that
we
dwarf.
saw that dwarf.
Just like they used to accuse the witches, I saw her and she pointed a finger at me, and then somebody from my family got sick a couple days later. It's her fault.
And then the founder of Detroit and de la Mont Cadillac, he also saw the dwarf and lost his vast fortune and political standing. Well, there's no saying he wouldn't have lost it anyway.
He wouldn't have lost it anyway,
Again,
right?
just because you see this dwarf. Now, I don't know. You got to think about the years, though. That's 1801.
Those were very violent, turbulent times for a lot of countries and people that are.
But I'm looking at the year difference.
Okay.
1763, Captain Dalyell saw the dwarf and was massacred by the Indians.
Yeah.
In 1801, the wooden city of Detroit was destroyed by fire, and then the War of 1812 saw him prowling in the fog. So that's 1863. So that's 1863 until the War of 1812. So how many years is that? 63 to 77.
That's
45
about
years?
45 years.
So
yeah.
he could still be alive in 45 years.
Of course he
I mean,
could.
For a dwarf, that's pretty amazing to be alive that long.
For that long, yeah. And he probably got older, and he probably got more extreme looking, So, I mean, I don't wish, believe me.
I'm just tying it together, because then they said in the end of 1857, the two hunters were hunting and killed the gnome in the forest. So 1857, now you're talking that this guy is 90-something. So somewhere along the line,
he managed to live.
I think it turned into folklore, and we saw something. We thought it was the deadly red gnome, and we killed it in the forest. Do you know what I mean? It was probably something else.
Which means he probably lived as a hermit, and he probably made his living not being around near people, and then he was just only heard of.
But I doubt he lived to be 95, especially as a dwarf in that period.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty amazing. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I would be amazed if he actually lived that long.
Yeah, and I don't think it's right that these people got slaughtered or that these people lost their fortune. It's terrible for that to happen to anybody, but then people always placed blame back then. So
imagine someone knocking on your door, you're signing for a barrel, you open it up at home in your basement, it's this corpse of this weird gnome.
Oh my God, that would have horrified me.
Who the hell sent me a corpse of a gnome in a giant barrel, pickled? And then you're like, this is the most crazy thing I've ever received. I have no idea why I have this. Let me show my friend.
I think he sold it.
Well, no, then he said, let me show my friend. Friend comes
Yeah.
over. Barrel's knocked over. The lid's off. The gnome's gone.
I don't believe it. I think he
someone
made up that
steal it?
story.
You think so?
Yeah, I think he made up
What?
that story.
How could you make up a story if you'd never heard of it?
Because it was an oddity. He knew something. He knew it was something that was sent to him that was different.
Mm-hmm.
How could it have gotten that way, all that way, without being touched? All of a sudden, it's in his basement and it disappears.
He put it in the basement.
That's what I mean. He put it there. It made it all that way. It was mailed to him, and he puts it in his basement, and then it disappears.
I can't see anybody
I don't believe
stealing
it.
it because you would have to know it's in the basement to steal it.
He sold it, and he's making it up.
So is he making it up or did he sell it, Verna? Which one?
Both.
Well, you can't do both. You can't make up something and then turn around and sell something.
Sure, he can. That person can disappear and never hear, and they'll never hear from him again.
No, but what are you selling?
An oddity.
So then you didn't make it up, so it did show up.
No. I said he made up the story about it disappearing.
Oh, disappearing.
That's what I mean.
That's possible. Maybe
Yeah.
he showed his friend the gnome. He sold it to him and said, "Oh," and the guy tracked down the barrel
Right,
and he
so
said, "Oh, I don't know. It was
it
empty when I got
disappeared.
it. It was empty when I got it. The barrel lid was off."
Yeah.
That's true.
He can make up that story easily.
This is how those weird oddities actually end up in traveling sideshows and
Right.
weird antique stores. They
Right.
change hands like this, and
Yeah.
people are like, "What is it?" I really don't know. And there's this whole story about this gnome or dwarf, I guess, for reality's sake.
And to tell you the truth,
person.
I feel compassion for that poor little thing. It didn't have any rights.
It was probably trying to survive.
It was trying to survive. He didn't have any. He didn't have any rights, and he was displayed as somebody's oddity and packed in salt.
Well,
The poor thing.
Well, they thought he was dead, though.
This is a piece of life. This was life. I mean, it was a soul. It's terrible. The poor thing. He didn't have a chance.
No, I have a hunch. I don't think he probably came from another dimension. I have a hunch he was a small dwarf.
A small dwarf, yeah.
Who had rosacea, bad teeth, probably didn't hear well, didn't understand people too well. And of course they approach him with fear, so they try to attack him, and he's going to try and defend himself.
Right, and people like that back then, the disabled and people back then who had, who looked different and had disabilities were not treated
Not at
right.
all.
No,
Well, they were oddities. They're,
unless you came from like a well-off family and you were looked after, but
otherwise you're sent off to live in some crazy house.
yeah. Otherwise, you had to survive by yourself. Yeah, and one of the reasons why I claim that there could be nature spirits and that there are other dimensions and invisible spirits that we don't see that manage to slip here every once in a while is because when I was younger, I was this was not when I was a kid. This was when I actually in my 30s.
You're from Woolpit?
No, I was recovering from pneumonia.
Oh yeah.
My second bout of pneumonia. I was recovering, and I was meditating in this garden of this house I used to live in. And when I was meditating, I actually saw a short man with a beard staring and smiling at me.
I remember you told me that before.
Yeah,
That's
and no,
right.
and it's absolutely true. I'll stick by this story till the day I die. I saw him standing there and smiling at me. That garden had a lot of wild plants, and it had a peach tree growing back there, and I used to grow my herbs back there. And I had my eyes closed still. I saw him, and I smiled back, and I waved. And then I never saw him again. But ever since then, I knew that that in some energy spots there are doorways, even in the city.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe that they could exist, but not necessarily in this third dimensional realm here.
Going off on that idea,
Yeah.
we're also fixated on great distances. Like, we're going to go to another planet, another galaxy. We have to keep exploring further and further out distance-wise. But what we don't really take into consideration is we look at it as distance. Dimension could be right on top
It
of
could
you,
be.
underneath
Absolutely.
you, all around you.
Absolutely.
And that all the things you're looking for, aliens, whatever, on these distant planets that are billions of thousands of miles away, are right here all the time, coming in and out, in and out.
Absolutely.
And they don't know where they're at when they come here, and we
Right.
don't know what we see when they're here. And it's back and forth. They go back because it's safe. Like, where was I? What did I see?
And
did
I
I
think,
see a ghost? They're coming here. Like, who are these people? My God, they're dead people. Let's go back.
right. And I think that science is actually coming closer and closer to proving that a lot of this overlaps. Overlaps where we are. I mean, I've actually been asleep on this side of the room, and when I was in a deep sleep, I once saw something open up, and I saw a very tall angel walk through. Now, everybody thinks I'm nuts, but I've seen things. That's why I'm on this show, because I've seen things that I can't prove, but I know it happened.
You saw David Boreanaz come into your room?
David Boreanaz.
Who played Angel? He was a vampire.
I had no idea.
Oh, you mean another angel?
I was in a deep sleep, and it was on this side of the room. But when you say that, it makes sense to me that there is an invisible overlap where we are, rather than distances.
Yeah, it's not a distance.
Yeah.
It's a dimension. We just don't know how to travel to that dimension.
Right.
Even though we're soaking in it, for lack of a better
soaking
word.
in it, Madge. Right. That's exactly.
Yeah, you're soaking in it, Madge.
So it makes sense with what you're saying, and I don't expect any of the listeners here to believe in anything I'm saying, and
or
I'm
me.
not, and of course I'm not nuts, or
we
you.
discuss a lot of possibilities.
But we that's what we're here for. We're discussing possibilities. So it could be two things. It could be that this guy was a dwarf living in an unfortunate time where he was regarded as an outcast and he paid for it, or it could be that, like the Children of Woolpit, he wandered from some place where he was supposed to be, where he lost his way, and the dimensions overlapped, and he ended up here, and life was very hard for him. I don't know any other explanation.
The fact that they saw him continuously makes me think that he didn't come here, check it out, and leave.
No.
I think he came, wasn't sure how he got here, was stuck here.
Yeah.
If we go with that scenario.
If we go that scenario,
he had no idea, didn't understand anybody,
Mm-hmm.
had to scavenge. People thought he was crazy looking, a monster, the sign of bringer of death.
Yeah,
And all the while, he just had no idea where he was and didn't know how to get back, how he got there in the first place. And maybe he lived out his days and someone did kill him. We don't know.
And if he's actually used to nature, he probably lived out his days knowing how to survive and fend for himself. He probably had survival skills.
Yep.
And even if he was born here and he's just somebody with a disability, he knew how to survive on his own.
Yeah. Well, you'd have to.
It's
right?
You
either learn how to survive or you die.
and it's a very sad and lonely life.
Well, can you imagine trying to approach someone for help, food, understanding, and they all attack you?
Right.
Think you're the harbinger of death. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have bad teeth, you have rosacea, you're small.
There's no evidence that he tried to harm anybody else. He
No.
just looked creepy, and they didn't like it.
And he was misshapen, they said. Now, misshapen could mean
Hunchback.
you're a dwarf. A dwarf could be misshapen for people then.
Right.
But hunchback or something, some kind of deformity as a dwarf, that's even on top of that.
Right.
So,
Misshapen was what do you call that disease? Scully. The disease where your back is kind of.
is that the one like Elephant Man had part of?
Kind of. It's Richard III also had it too, but his wasn't as bad.
Oh, yeah, where your spine starts to bend.
To bend a little bit.
Yeah.
Some people have it more extreme than others. So that could have been why he was misshapen. And probably his bones were fragile, and he was a hunchback.
I mean, if this little man came out of the woods at you, I don't think
if he came out of the woods at me, and I did, okay, let's put it this way. If I'm in that scenario, if I see somebody coming out looking very red and misshapen, and he looked weird.
It just says penetrating eyes. It doesn't even say glowing
Penetrating eyes. Yeah,
It doesn't say
penetrating
glowing, it just says
meaning that he probably gave them a
eyes
look,
or-
or he gave them a look,
Yeah.
and they didn't like it. If I were in that situation, I don't know what I would do. I mean, of course, me being cautious with strangers, and especially in the middle of a forest by myself, me being a girl, I would probably be very careful approaching, but I wouldn't shoot at him, or I would probably have a rock in my hand, and in case he's harmful, just in case, and say, "How can I help you? What do you need? Anything? Who are you?" And if he just answers, "I'm an older man and I'm just by myself," okay, well, I'm passing through. Bye. Take off.
He says, "I'm looking for a wife."
I'll say, "Well,
come on, baby."
I say, "Go that way. You'll find one over there." I mean, I'm just saying, or if I'm with you, I would probably be cautious still, but I wouldn't shoot at him or whatever. I'd just say, "Do you need anything? What is your name? Do you need anything? Do you need help?"
I have a hunch these soldiers saw him, and then he disappeared back into the woods. They're like, "What the heck was that?"
Yeah.
That was some kind of demon, and oh my god, it's a harbinger of death. Something bad's going to happen. It's an omen. And then sure enough, they get attacked by the Indians and they get slaughtered.
Right. But then I would act this way to a stranger anyway, no matter how we looked in a forest.
But you wouldn't look well. You get also.
But if he looked
think
weird,
of the time period, 1793. Your ideals are going to be a bit different.
Look, they're definitely going to be different.
You're not used to seeing dwarfs ever. So
no.
If you saw one, it would be such an amazing sight.
And if he was red, he could have been sunburnt by spending all that time outdoors.
Living outdoors, the elements, the cold, the sun, whatever.
Yeah.
Bad teeth, like I said.
Yeah, scraggly hair. Probably didn't smell very clean.
Probably didn't have a pipe like they do. The garden gnomes do.
No, and he probably was dirty. You know,
living outside.
I mean, yeah. So
I don't know. Again, it's another one of those. It's like Woolpit again, where it could be real. It could just be kids from another village who wandered in, or they wandered from another.
But they treated the children of Woolpit with far more compassion than they treated this little guy.
Yeah. Well,
but they were just children, though.
Yep. Exactly.
So they had a different appearance. They probably looked scared.
So this guy had no chance from the get-go.
And he probably, I wonder why he didn't say anything to defend himself. Like I won't hurt you, or why didn't he?
None of the sightings talk about
him talking.
Communication. Just they see him, his misshapen form. They describe him, and then. Next thing you know, old trappers and stuff, next thing you know, they're attacked. They called him Nain Rogue, which I thought was interesting.
Rogue.
Which is a sinister supernatural entity whose appearance foretold misfortune and death. So maybe Nain Rogue was some other animal or creature that they associated with this red gnome. This gnome.
Could be.
This dwarf.
Now, obviously, they didn't say anything about him talking to defend himself, but he could have, for all we know, and they just didn't pay attention to him.
Unless he spoke another language and didn't understand them.
Oh, poor thing.
And vice versa. So it's so long ago and there's so little that it's hard to tell, but it's interesting either way, because you could look at it in different ways of, what if he came from another dimension.
Right.
But then again, you look at how the timeline. He would have had to be 95 to have lived that long to end up in the barrel.
Well, I hate to say this because I'm not making fun of anybody, and I've said this before. But if he was walking down Market Street here in San Francisco, he probably wouldn't even be noticed.
No, he'd fit right in.
He'd fit right in. I hate to say it. He'd probably have more of a chance out here.
Yeah, I think so too.
So I mean, it's not that I don't like. It's not that I like to approach people who are different, alone in a forest. I might be cautious, but...
Well, if it jumped out to you in the dark in the forest...
Well, that would be different. I would be cautious. That's a little much.
If anything jumped out at me from the bushes, I'm going to have a...
Of course we will.
Defend myself.
Of course, defend yourself, yeah.
I don't care if you're an animal, I don't care if you're a person.
But if he's just standing there looking, there's no reason to aim harm at somebody,
right.
But
Bottom
that's
line,
just it.
What do you think it was?
I think it was a dwarf.
I think it was a dwarf as well.
A dwarf who was an outcast of society, and he ended up around the wrong people. That's what I think.
I agree with you too. I don't think there's anything supernatural about this particular story.
No.
But again, we present it because we don't know. We really don't know.
We don't know.
That's why we present the mysterious.
And we're presenting with a modern view with what we know now. Yeah.
So.
Okay.
There you go. So there you go, folks. The interesting story of the red gnome. So now you know all about it. You can tell all your friends. If they receive a giant barrel of, it says pickled vegetables on it, and they open it, and you see a dwarf, you know you may have the red gnome.
There you go. Anybody knows where
Now,
they
you were
just
saying something about a picture.
picture?
You said, do they find, where's the picture of the red gnome? Did you say someone had a
Oh,
picture?
oh, you know what? I was wondering if anybody had a picture and knows where it is.
Oh.
Because it might have ended up in somebody's museum archive for all we know, but then if it did, I'm sure it would already be in
I can
print.
see Ripley's Believe It or Not. Probably
Ripley's
having
Believe It or Not.
In the 1800s and 1900s.
They had a lot of things that you don't hear about anymore. Ripley's Believe It or
Yep.
Not. Yeah.
I'd be curious to see if it ever showed up in one of the books.
If anyone has any information about this story that we haven't covered,
The red gnome.
then
Yep.
we're open to hearing about it.
Yep. All right, folks, that's another episode of Ecto Portal. And until the next episode, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Royalty-free, copyright-free music by Kevin MacLeod and Ross Bugden.